Hello, CRR members. I'm Tyler Neese, CRR's Government Affairs Director, and with us today is James Goff, Code Enforcement Officer with the City of Bend, and we're going to be talking a little bit about sign code. James, I know that you spoke with our members recently at the Bend tour and talked about some of the revisions to the sign code, new updates, some flexibility that's available there. So why don't we kick it off there, if that works for you, with a few questions. First of all, can you tell us about the new sign code changes?
Sure. So recently code enforcement advocated for some changes that really benefit the real estate industry. And basically what we were trying to do is ease up the restrictions for open house signs. So now the open house signs are, or they wouldn't be, hadn't been allowed in the past, we are allowing them in our right-of-way to a certain extent during daylight hours. Now that said, we should never be finding signs in curb ramps, sidewalks, medians, roadways, bike lanes, things like that. There's no reason that your sign should be there.
Absolutely. No, great. So those portable signs are now allowed in the right-of-way 7 days a week, like you said, which is great. Allows some flexibility for open houses. I think one question that we might get as a follow-up from some realtors, maybe especially those who are new, or just because I think it's kind of technical language, is what exactly is a right-of-way? So if you would kind of elaborate there for us, how does the city define right-of-way, and maybe what are some good pointers for where you can place a sign and where you can't place a sign?
Sure. So first off, the public right-of-way is that it's the reason for that area is for infrastructure. So you're going to have your underlying or underground lines and whatnot for water, electricity, gas, such nature. So when you think of the right-of-way, most of it's really easy to identify in areas that have landscape strips. So you have the curb, landscape strip, sidewalk, and so generally that right-of-way is all the way up to the edge of the sidewalk. Some of the older part of towns, you might see a sidewalk that's curb tight, but the right-of-way might be 20 feet beyond that. So it's just really, if you're going to be putting out a sign, it's a really good rule of thumb just to kind of think of it from the standpoint as, if my sign's on the pavement, it's probably in an area that it shouldn't be.
Sure. Great.
So one thing I forgot to mention too, that when you are putting the signs out in the right-of-way, there are some size restrictions. So they can't be over 4 square feet, and they can't be over 4 feet in height. They're 2 feet wide.
Okay. Great. And it's my understanding that the city has also implemented a zero tolerance policy. So I wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit more about that. What exactly does zero tolerance mean, and what is the fine for non-compliance?
Sure. So as anybody who's been selling real estate and been for the last couple of years, they should be aware that we have provided a lot of education. Sure. We've come to your meetings a handful of times. We have confiscated a ton of real estate signs, and we've issued warnings for those. We haven't had to really switch gears and started issuing citations, but we figured after loosening up the codes to allow the signs in the right-of-way, all the education that we've done, that enough's enough. There's no reason, common sense alone should tell you that you should never be putting a sign out in the right-of-way that's going to cause a hazard. It shouldn't be out in the roundabouts, the sidewalks, kind of like what I mentioned. But so now, if we see your sign and it's potentially causing a hazard, we will confiscate it, and you have to pay a fee to get it back. And you could potentially also receive a citation for that will go to not only the agent but to the brokerage, and that's a $750 fine per sign. And so we actually just issued one today for an agent that decided to, for lack of a better term, test the waters and put a sign out in the median.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, we appreciate that clarification. Something else you touched on when you spoke at the Bend tour the other day, you talked about balloons on open house signs, which, as you know, I don't think are an uncommon kind of attention-getting device. And so one thing you clarified that I think was new to some folks based on their reactions was the fact that if you attach balloons to a sign like an open house sign, that's actually counted as part of the maximum allowable height. So could you clarify for us, are balloons permitted on signs or other attention-getting devices like banners or pyrotechnics or things like that?
Well, first off, the sign code right now prohibits anything that's fluttering, windblown, spinning, or that's an inflatable device.
Okay.
So right there, that code language, balloons are just not allowed. But you've already touched on it. If they were something that we'd be considering, they would be considered in the overall height, the square footage. Generally, as soon as you attach a balloon, it's going to be over the height limitations anyways.
Okay, okay. So you mentioned fluttering devices. So would that discount those big inflatable guys at the used car lots? That
Yeah, can you stand up and demonstrate that for us?
or do that again?
Yeah.
And maybe we can get a clip.
Yeah.
We can show you there. But yeah, so you can't use that?
No.
No,
we
okay.
cannot.
All right. No, and not even if you applied for a permit?
No.
No, okay.
No.
I just want to make sure. So how about banners? So I know that that's something that realtors will use from time to time, or a variety of businesses do in town. And it's my understanding that there are some different rules around banners and a different process. Can you clarify that and let us know what that process looks like?
Yeah. So right now, banners are a great addition to your on-site ability to advertise for an open house, for a model home, whatever the case might be. Like you said, there are a few restrictions. So a banner is going to require its own standalone permit. And so you can get one per site per calendar year. And the permit is only good for 60 days, but the applicant determines what days those are going to be. So if you know that you're going to be having an open house on the weekends, and you don't need the banner out there during the weekdays, you could just apply to have it out there on the weekdays.
Okay.
Now granted, what's the average turnaround time for selling a home in Bend? It's a lot less than 60 days, I would imagine. So if you applied for the permit, you could potentially have it out there for the full 60 days. Now costs on that range from based on the size, and so those are going to cost the applicant between $140 to $250.
Okay. So it may be cost prohibitive depending on the situation.
Yeah, possibly.
Sure. Okay. So, and I know that you touched on this in a couple of the other questions, but what are some of the common misconceptions around real estate signs that you see or that other folks in your office see?
So it's really amazing to me at this point that when we get agents that come from other jurisdictions and they use the excuse, well, I could put my sign on the sidewalk in my previous location, or I could put it in the street. Well, we know that's not true, because no matter where you work in the United States, ADA prohibits those signs on the sidewalk. And it's amazing just to see how many agents that we still want to put them in curb ramps or in sidewalks or in bike lanes. But the most favorite part or place here in town seems to be our roundabouts. And a lot of people don't realize that some of the areas that they're putting these signs in our roundabout, that's actually part of the street. Or they potentially could be causing an obstruction of clear vision. There's all sorts of factors, and so we don't want to see them in our roundabouts, either the inside portion or the outside portion of the roundabouts whatsoever. And so I guess the biggest misconception is I don't know, I guess they move here and think that they can just put them anywhere and nobody's going to do anything about it. That said, a lot of jurisdictions don't have the resources to enforce the code like we do. And so, I guess if they've been getting away with it for 10 years over in the valley and they move over here, it's a surprise to them to see that, no, we take this seriously and these are safety concerns, and that's why we're out enforcing this portion of the code.
Sure. So no roundabouts, no pavement. Those are a couple of good rules of thumb, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Great. So could you, I guess to kind of a little further on that point, can you give us some examples of, common right and wrong locations? I know you shared some photos at the tour meeting the other day, and you've touched on some of those. But one question I received from some brokers recently was, we talk a lot about the wrong locations. What are a couple of, common ideal locations, great place to put a sign that would be in compliance with code?
Well, we've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but and I don't think I can say it enough, is if it's on the pavement, it's probably in the wrong spot. So a good rule of thumb is if there's a landscape strip, put it there.
Yeah.
And if as long as it's under the size restrictions, you're going to be fine.
Great, great.
Now, that being said, there are landscape strips in the roundabouts. Don't put them there.
Sure, that's still
Yeah, it's a
that rule still
roundabouts,
applies.
no matter what, are a no-fly zone.
Sure, sure. That rule still applies. Well, how about quantity? So, how many on I guess a couple different types of signs. How many for sale signs are permitted, and then also open house signs? Are there requirements as far as the quantity on signs?
So let's just strictly talk about residential properties. And so right now you can have one sign on that residential property up to 6 square feet. The code does allow you to apply for an additional sign up to 32 square feet if you wanted one there. We generally aren't seeing those for the open house signs. We're seeing them more on the development side of things. Now, we purposely did not put a limitation on the number of open house signs. You might have a couple in the front yard, you might have a couple that are, directional signs that are leading to your roundabouts. And one of the things that we talked about during your last meeting is don't abuse it. Don't go out there at an intersection and put 20 signs.
Sure.
And so my advice to the industry right now is kind of look at this first year since we've loosened up the code as a trial period. And if we see people taking advantage of the code that says it doesn't limit the amount of open house signs, if we start seeing 20 signs, going to an open house that are 6 miles away, we're probably going to have to revisit that. A lot of jurisdictions have limited it to the point where they allow the open house signs, but they may only allow a sign up to a block away from your open house, and that really defeats the purpose of being able to put those signs out directing people to an open house if you're buried in a subdivision or whatnot, because you want to be able to get those open house signs out to the arterials.
Sure, sure. And how about the duration? How long can a sign stay in the ground? How long can a real estate sign stay in the ground?
So on the residential portion, it can be there as soon as you've signed a contract. The house is listed for sale. Sometimes we see some people that will say, the signs will say, well, like coming soon. Technically, those don't adhere to our code. And then the sign can stay up until a week after the new owner has taken possession of the home.
Okay. And how about open house signs? What rules apply as far as how long an open house sign can stay?
So daylight hours. So kind of, the way to look at that in just layman terms is if the agent's there, they can be there as long as it's daylight hours.
Oh, okay.
So obviously in summertime it can stay up a little bit longer.
Okay. So a good rule of thumb would be bring it with you, take it with you when you leave.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So if our members see a sign that's not in compliance with code, what would you recommend that they do?
So personally, if I'm working in the industry and I see one of my fellow brokers that maybe just wasn't aware of the code, that's maybe new or whatnot, I'm going to give them a courtesy call. I'm going to call the firm, or I'm going to call that agent individually and just remind them of the code, because with our zero tolerance policy, that's a hefty fine. And even if they don't, even if they work for a competitive agency, you know what, you never know. You might be partnering with that person in the sale of a home, and goodwill goes a long way. So I would really encourage anybody in the industry to call the firm or the agent before they call code enforcement. Now, granted, if it's in the middle of a curb ramp or something like that, and I mean everybody should know that shouldn't be there. They can call code enforcement directly.
Sure. Great advice. So start with professional courtesy, contact a broker, and go from there. Okay. Great. So in closing, what one piece of advice or pointer would you leave with our realtors as far as staying in compliance with sign code? Any Jamesisms that you would leave us with?
Well, a couple different things is, first I would encourage all of our firms here in town to have some sort of onboarding program for any, it doesn't matter if it's a brand new agent of that just passed their exam and got their license versus somebody that's moving to Ben that has 20 years of experience. Sit them down, let them know about our sign code, because the last thing we want to do, we don't want to have to issue citations. And so do yourself a favor, make sure your employees, your new people, your veterans, everybody that works for you is educated and is very aware of our code. The other thing that I'd like to leave with is just, again, if you're putting your sign on pavement, it's probably in a wrong spot. Find a different location, because believe it or not, we have better things to do than confiscate real estate signs and issue citations to people that just want to ignore the code.
Sure.
And so we would much rather be spending our time doing other things than having to enforce our sign code. So we really are grateful with the partnership that we have with you guys, and the ability to come have these kinds of dialogues, and I hope this will continue and we can continue with our outreach in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, James. There you have it, everything you need to know about sign code. A special thanks to James Goff with the City of Bend. We appreciate your time and willingness to come and answer some of these FAQs we have. If you want to learn more about the City of Bend sign code, you can always visit the City of Bend's website. Go to the code enforcement page, and there's more information there, as well as contact information for you and Teresa and the other folks on the team. You can also visit our website, coar.com. You go to the Government Affairs section under Tools and Resources. We have some FAQs and other helpful resources regarding the City of Bend sign code. Thanks a lot, James.
Thank you.